Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of my video essay on Afghanistan and why so many countries fail to conquer it. Today we'll be looking at the military aspects. Military failures such as issues with leadership, logistics, morale and tactics cursed many operations within Afghanistan. These issues will affect military performance, often destabilizing the country and its regions because of an inadequate or incompetent military presence. Incompetent leadership was evident in the First Anglo-Afghan War, as Major General William Elphinstone had no field experience since Waterloo back in 1815. Consequently, he made poor decisions during the latter years of the First Anglo-Afghan War, so even his own 44th Foot Regiment refused to follow some of his orders. Lady Sale, in her account, remarked in her diary that no sooner was a command issued than it was countermanded. His subordinates questioned his commands to the extent that they virtually flouted his authority. Elphinstone's leadership reflected the flaws of the British chain of command during the campaign in Afghanistan. It was a warning to any future invaders that leaders must be able to adapt to the foreign and brutal conditions of Afghanistan. As a result of Elphinstone's incompetence as a leader, his entire command was massacred during the infamous retreat from Kabul in 1842. Military incompetence was highlighted clearly during the ill-fated retreat from Kabul, where a lack of order was evident. Panic and disorder drove civilians into the ranks of the soldiery. Again, according to Lady Sale's accounts, the column of troops had become so strung out that on the morning of the 7th of January 1842, the rear guard only reached the main body at 2 a.m. The reality is that it was no military retreat, rather a panicked flee from Kabul in freezing weather and without strong leadership. There was a lack of discipline, and evidently, the troops of Britain were unprepared for the conditions in Afghanistan. Similarly, during the 1980s, the Soviet conscripts were not trained for this type of guerrilla war. There was to be no front line, impacting the performance of an army equipped for fighting NATO during the Cold War. The force structure, tactics, and the weaponry all had to undergo alteration, which would eat up valuable time and resources. The Soviets remained shackled to the methods they knew and understood, resulting in the use of conventional offences, which were ineffective against an enemy that could easily assimilate into the civilian population after wreaking havoc. The mechanised infantry tactics adopted by the Soviet Union could hardly be utilised in Afghanistan, due to the mountainous terrain, making the reliance on APCs futile. Therefore, this lack of adaptability cost the Soviets valuable time, as they had to rely on specialised tactics which the Soviet war machine was not optimised for. The structure of the Soviet army itself was also flawed. General Lyakovsky paints a devastating picture of the 40th Army's performance, stating, "Units were under strength, and the need to stay alert day or night led to physical exhaustion and low morale. They were poorly trained, and their equipment was inadequate. Junior commanders were tactically inept, so even when at an advantage, the rebels were too often able to break out." He also stated that the war demonstrated the military's weakness, robbed it of its confidence, and dispelled the myth of the Soviet Union's military invincibility. This essentially summarises the military performance of the Soviets throughout the war, as they struggled to adapt to this form of fighting and lacked any direction from junior commanders. The 40th Army's main bulk was made of conscripts. These soldiers weren't keen on fighting a war for which had little known purpose, and this would severely affect morale and the combat effectiveness of the Soviets within Afghanistan. Vladislav Tamarov of the 103rd Air Assault Division, regarding conscription, recalled, "We had no choice. Some young men broke their legs, some paid money to be exempt from service. highlighting the unwillingness to fight and potentially die in such a war many deemed pointless. Suleiman Khalifeyev stated, "I've served 2 years and still don't know a thing." These conscripts clearly lacked the willpower to fight in a conflict they didn't understand, and this would hinder military performance as many would be unwilling to take risks when they just wanted to go home. Another military issue suffered by both the Soviets and NATO was troop numbers. The 40th Army in Afghanistan was lacking in size, with an average of around 118,000 men serving in Afghanistan at any given time. These small numbers proved to be insufficient in securing over the 20 provincial centres, and this inadequate numbers of men made the necessary protection of miles of road and communication lines near impossible. As Gregory Fremont Barnes put it, the invaders failed to appreciate both the sheer scale of the enterprise and the colossal manpower required. Equally, NATO suffered from insufficient numbers of men, especially for combat roles. This was due to many NATO countries refusing to send in troops for active combat. Like the Soviets, this would restrict the capability to cover the vast expanse of Afghanistan, and even less adequate at combating the Taliban and participating in the so-called nation building as adopted by NATO. War crimes too played a role in the military failures as they boosted recruitment for the enemy, and in the Soviet war in Afghanistan they were prevalent. Due mostly to discontent within the Soviet ranks, atrocities took place, and the Afghan citizens were often victims of controversial and oppressive behaviour from many Soviet troops. Evident by the end of the war, over 2,500 Soviet soldiers were serving prison sentences, with more than 200 for premeditated murder. As with most wars, there were many reports of rape and unjust murder, such as the horrific incident carried out on the 14th of February 1981, where there was a raping and killing near Jalalabad. Due to this being relatively early in the war, there were fears that this may cause a countrywide jihad. This, amongst with many other events, caused growing disdain within the countryside, making inhabitants less likely to work with the Soviets, equally boosting recruitment into the Mujahideen for personal revenge against the invaders. Similarly, NATO war crimes weren't uncommon either. Even if we dismiss the civilian casualties due to the countless inaccurate bombings as collateral damage, there were still many cases of what would be considered war crimes. A publicised example being the deaths of 19 civilians when US Marines had fired upon civilian cars and pedestrians in Nangarhar in 2007. A US investigation insisted that the response was out of proportion to the threat. These incidents showcase a lack of discipline, which let the Taliban use these and the constant airstrikes as a motive for recruitment. Likewise, nearly all strategy in NATO's campaign was trickled down from the top, thus oftentimes resulting in vague orders with no real strategy. Brigadier Andrew Mackie had stated, "Advice I obtained from London was vague to the point of being meaningless," reinforcing the lack of strategy prevalent within the war. The debate over troop numbers was also a political issue. Germany, for example, refused to send troops to Afghanistan for combat roles, and this disunity within NATO meant each country was operating slightly differently, which largely affects the results in Afghanistan, as a full, collaborative effort could have simplified issues such as combating the Taliban along with successful nation building. Although each invading army was superior technologically and would undoubtedly win in a conventional battle, the guerrilla tactics utilised by the Afghan rebels created a much more different circumstance. Everyone within the country could be a potential threat, requiring constant military patrols and forward operating bases across the vast expanse of the country. This was more complex than a conventional conflict, and many soldiers struggled to apply their training to such complicated scenarios. Simply put, these armies couldn't operate in an effective way due to these various factors, leading to confusion and fear and resulting in war crimes, and a logistical failure which only bolstered rebel recruitment. Once again, thank you for watching this video. There should be another part coming along soon, which will focus on cultural barriers between the invading forces and the people of Afghanistan, and how that contributed to the inevitable failure of these countries trying to conquer a nation known as the Graveyard of Empires. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe.